Good afternoon. My name is Randy Wietman, and I'll be your MC for today's Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day and World War II Heritage City reception ceremony. So basically two parts. As you can tell by this, I'm Matt, I think that's Matt's way of let's move this along. Thanks, Matt. I'm a retired naval officer. I retired about 13 years ago, and I'm also on the North Kingstown 350th Anniversary Steering Committee. Today we pay tribute to our nation's World War II veterans, members of our greatest generation, who went to war and defeated the Axis powers. It's a bit of an understatement to say that we owe them a debt of gratitude for their service and their sacrifice. Let us give a round of applause for the World War II veterans, past and present, and by the way, we do have one here today, which is becoming increasingly rare. For the World War II veterans. More on who that is in just a minute. First of all, it's my pleasure to recognize the following distinguished visitors who have joined us today. Rear Admiral Darryl Walker, U.S. Navy, President of U.S. Naval War College. Brigadier General. This is a long list, by the way, so. We're in good company here. Brigadier General Andre Chevalier, U.S. Army, National Guard, Director of Joint Staff and Commander Land Component Command for the Rhode Island National Guard. Commander Jason Hickley, Executive Officer of the Naval Station Newport. Commander Ian Underwood, Public Works Naval Station Newport. Lieutenant Emil Scown, Executive Officer of the PCU, or Pre-Commissioning Unit, for a submarine being built right here, and that's the USS Arizona. Lieutenant Sam Dong, Main Propulsion Assistant, PCU, Arizona. And the Command Master Chief, Abel Grigio, U.S. Naval War College. MMN2 Alexander Piscopo, PCU, Arizona. EMN2 Lucio Romero, PCU, Arizona. And Veteran Service Organizations, Dave Malone, State Commander, American Legion, Patrick Murray, Director of National Legislative Service, Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, and Lieutenant Governor Matos. And last but not least, as you know, this is our 350th anniversary of our founding for North Kingstown. So this is a special day for a number of reasons. We've had roughly 60 to 65 events associated with that, and that the steering committee did a great deal of work in putting that together. For this particular event, I can tell you that we went out approximately a year. We started this, and planning this event for the application for the Heritage World War II Award. For this particular event, started 3 or 4 months ago. There are a lot of moving parts here, and it's a lot of work, and I'm very familiar with it. So I would be remiss if I didn't point out the contributions of two more people in particular, and that is Kate Glass, who is, and one of our town councilors, Matt McCoy. I'm very familiar with what it takes to do this, and they have done, honestly, most of the heavy lifting. Today we pay tribute to our nation's World War II veterans, members of the greatest generation, who went on the war to defeat the Axis powers. And we owe them a debt of gratitude for their service and sacrifice. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have one from World War II, George Silva, who is right over here to my left. George is, doesn't look like it, but George is 99. He will be 100 in June, is that right, George?
June, yes.
June, yes. He was a parade marshal for our 350th parade. So we're going to do 4 things here in short succession, and that is the invocation by Reverend Lee Hardgrove, presentation of colors and playing national anthem, and then recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So please rise and remain standing for those 4 things.
I have been told to keep things short. I moved that suggestion on to our other speakers. But I have one personal remembrance. December 7th, 1941, my mother turned 25. It was her birthday. And on that day, my grandparents, my mother's parents invited my father's parents over to announce their engagement. And while they were there, my grandmother said to my father, her future son-in-law, "We need something for dinner. Can you run out to the deli?" Delis are things that they had in New York then, even in 1941. And he was gone a long time, and my mother was afraid that maybe he had gone someplace besides the deli. And as it turned out, he was in the deli, and the radio was on. And he heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And my mother must have really thought he was a little wacko, because he came home singing "You're in the Army Now," and 4 months later he was drafted. So it's a day that my parents got engaged. And my closest friend ever was born on December 7th, 1949, survived as a demolitions expert in Vietnam, and then was killed in a car crash 3 years later. So the day has some special meaning for me, but it's more important for the rest of us. So let us pray. Gracious God, we give thanks for this day that we can gather in this place, so beautifully restored by our Seabees, and now able to be used for so many events, especially one like this. And we remember those who served in World War II. There were so few left. We remember those who lost their lives on this day in 1941, in total unexpected attack. And after that came that war that this community was able to be such a part of, that we now get this special designation on this day as a special heritage community, and for that we're thankful. But we also must remember, dear God, that wars continue, and our American service men and women serve in many places throughout the world on this day, some in harm's way, some at home stations, but all ready to answer the call, as we have a number of those active duty people here with us today. So bless them and bless their families. Bless our country and help us to remember all the sacrifices that were made so that we can be here in a free nation. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Our nation's colors will now be presented, a national anthem and a Pledge of Allegiance. Color Guard, present colors.
Flag
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color Guard, post the colors. Before 1986, Pearl Harbor Day was observed informally. You can have a seat now, thank you. It was observed informally on December 7th each year with various commemorative events, including ceremonies at the USS Arizona Memorial, veteran gatherings, moments of silence, etc. On October 27th of '86, the members of the 98th United States Congress passed a joint resolution designating December 7th as National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. On December 2nd, 1986, President Ronald Reagan issued a proclamation proclaiming December 7th, '86 as National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, but neither the joint resolution nor the presidential proclamation called for the annual observation of National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. So on August 23rd, '94, the members of the 103rd United States Congress passed a subsequent joint resolution, also known as the Joint Resolution for National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, which designated December 7th as that day each year to honor those who died in the attack on Pearl Harbor. President Bill Clinton signed the joint resolution into law, issued a proclamation declaring December 7th, '94 the first National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day has been observed annually throughout the United States since. On this National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, an 83rd anniversary of the Japanese attack, we gather to remember and pay tribute to the 3,581 American service members and civilians who were killed or wounded at our military installation on the Hawaiian island of Oahu on the morning of Sunday, December 7th, 1941. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked a pivotal moment in history, awakening America to a new reality of hardship and the almost certainty of a protracted war. The American people, both on the battlefields and the home front, rose to this challenge with resilience and determination. The adversity faced by those who served not only forced stronger individuals, but also united the nation with a collective resolve. This 83rd anniversary is a tribute to their unyielding spirit and the powerful sense of duty that propelled them to face and overcome insurmountable odds. Now, as we commemorate this day, we must also look to the future and the role of the younger generation carrying forward the legacy of the greatest generation. It is essential for today's youth to understand and appreciate the sacrifices made during World War II, particularly in the Pacific Theater, which began with the attack on Pearl Harbor. By doing so, they can draw inspiration from the courage and determination of those who came before them, understanding that the pursuit of peace requires the same resolute spirit that was needed to fight and win this war. The 83rd Pearl Harbor Remembrance Ceremony serves not only as a moment of reflection and gratitude, but also a call to action for the younger generation. It is a reminder to build on the solid foundation left by that greatest generation, adapting to new challenges with the same fortitude and commitment as we honor the past. We forge ahead. We forge ahead, ensuring that the lessons of history continue to guide us, creating a future that upholds the values of courage, resilience, and peace. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Director Kasim Yarn, the Director of Veterans Affairs for the state of Rhode Island, Director Yarn retired from the U.S. Navy as Lieutenant Commander in 2016 after completing 20 years of enlisted and commissioned service, including tours of the Surface Warfare Officers School, better known as SWAS, and the United States Naval War College in Newport. Coincidentally, Kasim is a resident of North Kingstown.
Thank you, sir. Unfortunately, the governor couldn't be here today, but sends his kind greetings. As you call, he would say NK all the way if he was here. State of Rhode Island gubernatorial proclamation. Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. Whereas on this day, 82 years ago, U.S. naval forces at Pearl Harbor were under a surprise attack on a peaceful Sunday morning, and whereas more than 2,300 soldiers, sailors, and Marines were lost, and our nation's Pacific fleet was severely damaged. And whereas we will always remember those who paid the ultimate price at Pearl Harbor and honor their courage and sacrifice. And whereas we continue to be inspired by those who survived and continue to serve our nation at this time in the greatest need. And whereas the treachery and brutality of the attack on Pearl Harbor galvanized millions of Americans to join the war effort to defeat tyranny and secure freedom. And whereas when these brave men and women came home from after the war, they built a country that we will lead the world. And whereas the Rhode Islanders across our state salute the value and sacrifice of the greatest generation, especially those who defended Pearl Harbor against the attack, served the lives of fellow Americans, and defended the fighting spirit to which eventually went back to Pacific and contributed to the defeat of the Axis powers. And whereas on this day, we remain grateful for their selfless service to continue to be inspired by their unwavering devotion to our nation. And whereas approximately 66,000 World War II U.S. service members are still alive today, including about 1,000 in the state of Rhode Island. And whereas following the attack, Pearl Harbor and the world learned that no challenge is too great when we stand as one people committed to the ideals upon which our nation was founded. Now, therefore, I, Daniel J. McKee, Governor of the state of Rhode Island, do hereby proclaim December 7th, 2024 as Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day in the state, and encourage all Rhode Islanders to recommit in the ideals of valor and service, to take care of our neighbors, honor those who protect us, and join me in recognizing the importance of this day. Giving in my hand the great seal of the state of Rhode Island. Daniel J. McKee, Governor, also signed by Greg Morey, Secretary of State. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant Commander Emil Scown, United States Navy. Lieutenant Commander Scown is the executive officer that I mentioned earlier on the pre-commissioning unit being built here in North Kingstown, the Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine USS Arizona. Lieutenant Commander Scown is an experienced submariner, having served in various engineering and operational assignments in the USS Nevada, USS California, USS Colorado, in Submarine Squadron 2. He has completed 5 strategic deterrent patrols. Lieutenant Commander Scown is the recipient of numerous military awards, including the Navy Commendation Medal, Navy Achievement, etc. He and his family live in Groton, Connecticut. I invite Lieutenant Commander Scown to the podium.
First of all, to the town of North Kingstown, thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I'm humbled to take part in this special ceremony as we remember this fateful day when America's resolve was tested. The state which will live in infamy can never be forgotten, and ceremonies such as this allow us to pause and remember the bravery of the men and women of America's armed forces, as well as the dedication of the families that support them. Distinguished guests, Lieutenant Governor Matos, elected officials, general and flag officers, commanding officers, command master chiefs, veterans, esteemed citizens of North Kingstown, proud Americans. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to be here today. As mentioned, my name is Lieutenant Commander Emil Scown, and in my present assignment, I have the privilege of serving as executive officer on the future USS Arizona SSN-803, a new fast attack submarine being built right here in Quonset Point at General Dynamics Electric Boat, with that final assembly taking place in Groton, Connecticut. We are the first naval vessel since the battleship BB-39 to be named after the state of Arizona. My commanding officer, Commander Tom Deacon, couldn't be here today as he's actually participating in a ceremony in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii to commemorate today's events. However, it is my honor to deliver remarks on his behalf. The name Arizona will forever be linked to the attack on Pearl Harbor that occurred 83 years ago today. On what began as a quiet Sunday morning, our nation was thrust into chaos and a conflict that spanned the globe. As the generations have passed, it's difficult to fathom just what it must have been like to be there that day. Time has erased many signs of what happened there, but one thing that can't be missed is the stark white memorial that sits atop the wreckage of the battleship Arizona. This memorial serves not only as a marker for the 1,177 men of the battleship who lost their lives, but as a monument to the bravery and the valor of all the gallant men who fought there that day. Many of their stories will never be known, but we as a nation have an obligation to ensure that the stories which are known are not forgotten. Within the submarine force, stories of heroism during World War II continue to inspire us and serve as a core part of our shared identity and warfighting ethos. On December 7th, 1941, the battleships of the Pacific Fleet were decimated. As a result, our submarines were pressed into a role that far exceeded the prevailing naval strategy of the time. Submarines made up just 2% of the Navy, about 16,000 men in total during World War II. Despite this small size, their success was staggering. 55% of Japanese vessels lost at sea were sunk by American submarines. Almost 700 Japanese warships, more than 2,300 merchantmen, 10.5 million tons of shipping. As the war came to a close, our submarines had difficulty in finding targets, as the Japanese essentially had no ships left to sink. Through their acts of valor, 7 submarine commanding officers were awarded the Medal of Honor during World War II. Their names like Eugene Fluckey, Dick O'Kane, and Howard Gilmore, are synonymous within our force with courage and resolve that seem legendary. World War II also showed us the incredible industrial might that this nation and a people united are capable of. Whole factories and assembly lines were converted to produce supplies that kept America fighting. Everyone contributed to the war effort. That spirit lives on an electric boat in Quonset Point, where the hard work and the commitment of Rhode Island's great shipbuilders delivers the world's finest submarines. Their dedication to quality ensures the safety of America's sons and daughters as they sail into harm's way beneath the waves in an unforgiving sea. On days like today, we're able to take the time for ceremonies that allow us to pause and reflect. I encourage you to consider what role you can play in preserving the legacy and the history of our country's greatest generation. The crew of the future USS Arizona will continue to proudly carry forward our namesake and share the stories of our nation's heroes. We, along with all those who wear the uniform, will also honor past generations in the same way that we ensure we preserve democracy for future generations, through our readiness and our preparation to carry out our military duties, to deter conflict, and if necessary, to fight and win our nation's wars. To the hardworking American shipbuilders at Electric Boat, continue to embody the spirit of the nation's industrial might through your commitment to delivering the world's finest submarines. We're counting on you. To the town of North Kingstown, congratulations on the recognition and the honor that is being bestowed upon you today. It's a testament to the patriotism of your town, as well as the great state of Rhode Island. Undoubtedly, it will renew your commitment to remembering the history and telling the stories of our greatest generation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us here today.
Thank you, XO. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Rear Admiral Darryl D-Day Walker, United States Navy. He has asked me not to read his bio. By the time he put on 2 stars, it's quite long, so there's a reason for that. But Rear Admiral Darryl is the president of the Naval War College. Admiral.
Thank you. Hey, good afternoon. Director Yarn had kind of mentioned it over here. You got three folks from 3 different communities up here on the dais there. You have a sub, or the seabed of the side of the Navy. You have a surface with Kasim Yarn, and then you have the aviation side, the sky. So when you really think about it, you know, from the seabed to the space, this is truly what the Navy does for our nation. I can't thank you all enough for being here, and this chapel is absolutely, oh, I apologize, sir, wonderful. Can you hear me? Okay. It's a quaint situation or chapel for us all to be here today on a Memorial Day of remembrance. And I truly appreciate you all being here today. Lieutenant Governor Matos, ma'am, you being here is truly an honor to have you here today, taking time out of your busy schedule. I know Senator Reed wanted to be here, Representative Amos wanted to be here today too, but I think they got called down to DC for other business. And all the other distinguished members here today, the Brigadier General Andy Cavalier, I butchered your last name, my apologies. Chevalier. Thank you for being here on behalf of Chris Cavanaugh and the rest of the team. And especially the crew of the USS Arizona Pre-Com XO, thanks for being here. Having you all here is a special for not only the team of just me here to see you here and the rest of the military members, but also for the town of Kingstown. And I was doing some research, and if you look at Quonset Point, Quonset Point, Naval Air Station Quonset Point birth was in July of 1941. And if you think of Rhode Island, I mean, the smallest state in the Union, but packs the biggest punch for the nation when you really think of what the men and women do in and out of uniform in this small state. So as Quonset Point came to birth, and then by the fall and into the winter of 41 and beyond, provided a lot of ships and aircrafts for the fight in World War II. So be proud of what your little state here does for the nation each and every day. It's truly an honor to be here, and thank you again for letting me be a small part of this. I do want to thank you, Matt McCoy, and the town of North Kingstown and the town council for setting up this important event, especially in this wonderful chapel. It's a great day to be here and for us to take a time to reflect on our past, honor the sacrifices of those who came before us, and express our deepest gratitude to each and every one of the brave men and women who have served our great nation, especially those from your own neighborhood during World War II, to pay tribute to their sacrifices and look to apply their lessons for our future, especially to have George Silva here today. Thank you, sir. We all truly get to stand on the shoulders of these remarkable people who answered the call of duty and made a tremendous sacrifice for the greater good. So at the Naval War College today, we often talk about great power competition in the Pacific Theater. This is a very relevant topic that is given the world events, but we also would be wise to remember that it's not the first time we've encountered a peer or near-peer competitor in the Western Pacific. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941 was a hallmark event and a clash between two rising maritime powers, and marked the beginning of an existential struggle in the Pacific that required the full resources of both nations. We became bitter enemies and left deep scars on both nations. But the story of World War II great power competition did not end in 1945. Instead, it turned into a story of great power collaboration. With all the horrors that accompanied total war, at its conclusion, both sides had ample reasons to distrust one another, yet the two great countries instead chose to work together in a spirit of tolerance, reconciliation, and friendship. Through this partnership, both countries were able to grow and realize the potential on the world stage. Just 2 days ago, I have 2 Japanese officers that are going through the Naval War College. They led a Pearl Harbor Remembrance to the entire War College available to students. That's how much they care. It's important that we honor the men and women who served during this war, not just for their service to this great crisis, but also recognizing the hard work and the continue to build a better peace at the end of the world. Today, we memorialize the attack on Pearl Harbor as a momentous event in the world history, as the attack ultimately drew the United States into World War II. The loss of life in the war that followed was undoubtedly among our greatest national tragedies. But we need to ensure that we take care to memorialize this event properly. In the spirit of understanding the past, that was stated earlier, Japan felt compelled to attack the United States, and we examined their state justification for being in that war as a way of understanding how the future adversary may look at the United States and feel compelled to choose war over peace. This is especially relevant today as a new power is rising in the East. We look not only to motivation, but we also look to strategies on both sides of the conflict that followed. The United States leveraged her awesome industrial might to build the military that still stands today as the exemplar for the rest of the world. But the Japanese also had a large and capable force. They had been faced with a long war in China and had veteran corps that was battle-tested by 1941. They had ships and aircraft that could rival any other fleet in the world, and they tried. In the early days of the war, especially in the far-flung places like Guadalcanal, it was the bravery and tenacity of our fighting forces that kept us from disaster. Over the course of the war, though, we leveraged our industrial base to build a force the size of which the Japanese simply could not answer. Of course, equipment alone does not win wars. We all know that. It's the brave people who raised their right hand, swore allegiance, and joined the fight, including George Silva and many others from North Kingstown. Equally important were those brave individuals who rolled up their sleeves, went to work in the factories that churned out material necessary to win the war, day after day, night after night. At the end of the war, it was these individuals who looked around at our shattered world and stated, "We can do better." This is why they have earned the title, Greatest Generation. Ferocious in battle, magnanimous in victory. I call on everyone here to remember the history that has made us where we are today. History is just not an interesting story, but a call to action. We spend a great deal of our time at the War College thinking about our role in the next war. We do this by committing ourselves to furthering our studies and using the latest technologies available in wargaming, research, and analysis to think through those problems we would likely face in the next war. Such great naval heroes like Raymond Spruance and Chester Nimitz walked the halls of the Naval War College, thinking through the logistical problems of World War II. They and so many of the less famous officers did the same. The War College stayed open during World War II, and our education program changed to meet the needs of the fleet. I'm committed to making sure that we continue this legacy of peacetime academics, rigor, in support of our future fleets. As we honor the legacy of the fine Americans, let us all commit ourselves to continuing the legacy of service, sacrifice, and building a better world for our future generations that are behind us here. Finally, to the family members of our World War II veterans, we express our deepest gratitude for your sacrifices that you made, the hardships that you endured, and the unwavering support you provided your loved ones in uniform. Your strength and your resilience during these challenging times are a testament to the profound bond that unites military families. Thank you all again, the Town of North Kingstown, for putting together this ceremony, not only as a remembrance of the 83 years ago, but also reflect on the lessons learned since that dark day. More importantly, thank each and every World War II veteran present here and around the world today for their service, their sacrifice, and their unwavering dedication to this country. Your bravery and selflessness will never be forgotten, and we are forever grateful for the freedom and security that you have secured to us, sir. As we embark further into the 21st century, The alliances that we have forged in the Pacific will continue to be essential to key in maintaining a peaceful and prosperous world. I hope that we'll be able to follow in the example of our predecessors. Thank you, sir, and thank you all.
Thank you, Admiral Walker. The Japanese surprise attack on the naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on the morning of December 7, 1941, served as a catalyst for the United States entry into the Second World War. A total of 2,403 American service members and civilians were killed. 1,178 were wounded as a result of the attack. The fallen and wounded, including members of the U.S. Army, the U.S. Army Air Force, as it was known back then, the U.S. Marine Corps, the U.S. Navy, and civilians. We now pay tribute to the fallen of December 7, 1941. In keeping with today's National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day theme of forging ahead, we have invited Sea Cadets from the Naval Construction Battalion Center of the United States Navy Sea Cadet Corps to serve as our flag bearers for this tribute to the fallen. The Sea Cadets will be carrying the service flags of the U.S. Army, the U.S. Marine Corps, and the U.S. Navy. They will dip these flags when tribute is paid to the fallen of each of the services. We will pay tribute to the fallen by service in the following order: United States Army, including the Army Air Forces, United States Marine Corps, and the United States Navy. As part of our tribute to the fallen, we will be tolling the bell 7 times at a 7-second interval, and each toll signifies a distinct stage in the fallen service member's life. The meaning of each toll is as follows. Toll 1 is the choice to serve. The choice to serve symbolizes a service member's readiness to sacrifice their life for their country. A dedication that only a few have chosen. Toll 2, camaraderie. Camaraderie represents the bonds of friendship, family ties, and the unity shared by all of those serving on December 7th, 1941. Toll 3 is patriotism. Patriotism symbolizes a service member's pride in their country, a commitment to defend it, and the happiness in cherishing the freedoms protected by our Constitution. Toll 4 is respect. Respect embodies a reverence bestowed upon service members by the community, earned through their service and rightfully honored by us. Toll 5 is dignity. Dignity symbolizes the respectful treatment that a veteran's community accords to their fallen hero. Toll 6 is honor. Honor signifies the respect owed to a deceased service member by their fellow service members and their community. And Toll 7, the value of life. The value of life embodies the ultimate sacrifice made by the service member, whether lost in combat or in the years of dedicated service. The worth of a veteran, of course, cannot be fully expressed just in words. Our bell will be tolled today by the 99-year-old World War II veteran George Silva, to my left, as I think I mentioned earlier, who turned 100 in June. George served in the United States Army Guards in the European Theater of Operations and in the Pacific Theater of Operations as a commissioning member of a Cleveland-class light cruiser, the USS Atlanta, almost all of which are gone by now. I think there's only one left around. In the front here, we have the wreaths in front of the altar here, which pay homage to the sailors and the Marines of the USS Arizona, the USS California, the USS Maryland, the USS Nevada, the USS Oklahoma, the USS Pennsylvania, the USS Tennessee, and the USS West Virginia. Flag detail. Advance to service flags. And boatswain, man the bell. United States Army is first. 218 soldiers were killed and 364 wounded during the Japanese air attacks on U.S. Army airfields at Bellows Field, Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, Camp Malakale, Fort Barrett, and Fort Kamehameha, Fort Shafter, Fort Weaver, and Schofield Barracks. These attacks destroyed or damaged a total of 205 aircraft of the Army Air Forces. We remember the soldiers killed on December 7, 1941. A cadet dipped the flag for the U.S. Army. Boatswain, toll the bell. Cadet, you now raise the flag for the U.S. Army. United States Marine Corps, 109 Marines were killed, 69 wounded during the Japanese air attack on the Marine Corps Air Station, the U.S. Arizona, the USS California, the USS Helena, the USS Nevada, USS Oklahoma, and the USS Pennsylvania. The majority of those Marines were killed or wounded were assigned to the Marine Detachment stationed aboard U.S. Navy warships moored at Pearl Harbor. We remember the Marines killed on December 7, 1941. Cadet dipped the flag for the Marine service. Boatswain, toll the bell. See, Cadet, thank you. United States Navy, 2,008 sailors were killed and 710 wounded during the Japanese air attacks on Kaneohe Naval Air Station, Ford Island Naval Air Station, and the capital ships of the United States Pacific Fleet moored at Pearl Harbor. The majority of those service members killed were sailors assigned to the 8 battleships moored at what we know as Battleship Row adjacent to Ford Island. USS Arizona was hit by armor-piercing bomb. It exploded and it sunk. It was a total loss. Almost half of all American deaths on December 7th were from the crew of the Battleship Arizona, where 1,177 sailors perished. Notably, the USS Arizona had 38 sets of brothers aboard, including 3 sets of 3 brothers, and 63 of these siblings died in the attack. USS California. It was hit by 2 bombs and 2 torpedoes. It sunk. It was returned to service in January 1944. 105 sailors perished. USS Maryland. It was hit by 2 bombs, damaged, and returned to service on February of 1942. 4 sailors were killed. USS Nevada. Hit by 6 bombs, 1 torpedo. It was beached. Returned to service October of 42. 60 sailors were killed. USS Oklahoma, hit by 5 torpedoes, capsized, total loss, later refloated. It was the second highest of casualties occurred on the USS Oklahoma, where 429 sailors died. USS Pennsylvania was the flagship of the U.S. Pacific Fleet. The Pennsylvania was in dry dock with the USS Kasim and USS Downs. It was hit by 1 bomb, and the debris from the Kasim repaired. It remained in service. 9 sailors were killed. USS Tennessee was hit by 2 bombs, returned to service February of 42. 5 sailors were killed. USS West Virginia, hit by 2 bombs, 7 torpedoes. It sunk. It was returned to service July of 44. 106 sailors were killed. We remember the sailors killed on December 7th. Sea Cadet dip the flag for the Navy flag. Boatswain, tow the bell. Sea Cadets retire the flag detail. And Boatswain, George, take a more comfortable seat if you wish. Forging ahead, the best tribute to the fallen sailors of the 8 battleships at Pearl Harbor is the current service of the submariners assigned to the Ohio and Virginia-class submarines, named in honor of the World War II battleships. We were honored to be joined today by Lieutenant Commander Scown and members of the crew of the pre-commissioning unit Arizona. And after commissioning, they will join the crews of the submarines USS California, USS Maryland, USS Nevada, USS Oklahoma, USS Pennsylvania, USS Tennessee, and the USS West Virginia, continuing the legacy of the battleships that they were named for. By the way, 6 of these 8 submarines were built right here, I think was mentioned earlier, right here at General Dynamics Electric Boat here in Quonset and also in Groton. At this point, we're going to transition into the second half of this, and when we were talking about this in the 350th Committee, it all sort of made sense. Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day and the other end of World War II, which is our award of by the National Park System as the World War II Heritage City designation. The town of North Kingstown is celebrating its 350th anniversary this year, as I mentioned earlier, recognizing the significant impact that World War II had on the town. I think as Admiral Walker had mentioned earlier, I'm going to use this quote, I think he said, "The small state that carries a big punch." And I think that's absolutely true, at least in World War II. About a year ago, the 350th Anniversary Steering Committee submitted an application to the National Park Service for recognition as a World War II Heritage City or town. And by the way, this is a one-time designation. Emily's nodding her head. It does not happen annually, and it is awarded to one town or one city in the state. So North Kingstown is now and forever will be known as the World War II Heritage City for the state of Rhode Island. The town's application was endorsed by U.S. Senator Jack Reed and submitted to the National Park Service for consideration on September of 24. The National Park Service announced that the town of North Kingstown has been designated a World War II Heritage City, primarily because of the establishment of military facilities at Quonset Point in Davisville. These facilities, of course, included the Naval Air Station and the Naval Construction Battalion in Davisville. At this point, I'd like to introduce Town Manager Ralph Mollis. Ralph served as the North Providence Town Councilor from 86 to 96 and was elected Town Council President 93. He served as the Mayor of North Providence from 97 to 2007. Ralph served 2 terms as Rhode Island Secretary of State from 2006 to 14. Ralph became the town manager for North Kingstown in 2017, and we are blessed to have him here today. It's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the honor and the opportunity to bring, as Reverend Hardgrove mentioned, brief remarks to this very special ceremony and special remembrance. I know we have a lot of dignitaries here, and I'll mention that in a minute, but I do see some local dignitaries, so I just want to recognize Councilperson Linnea Drew, Councilperson Bethel Ross, State Representative Julie Casimiro. I know we have a former Councilperson, Larry Mandel, and if I'm missing everyone, I do apologize, but I did want to recognize some of our local individuals who, along with our state officials and the many dignitaries here, add a lot to this event. Again, my thanks to all who were involved in organizing this event. For the CB Museum, an organization that operates solely on volunteers and donations, for providing this perfect venue for today. The many dignitaries, the visitors, and the special individuals who have participated and brought remarks today, their participation has made this a very special event. And while you never want to point out anyone, I do want to just take a moment to point out Matt McCoy, Randy Wietman, and Kate Glass, who, again, thanks for all of their efforts in not only organizing this remembrance and ceremony, but also for their and the 350th Committee's work in getting this application and designation active and approved. And also to Matt and Randy, I want to thank you for your service, and also to Kate, her husband. I want to thank Alex for his service, who's here today. So there's a lot. They did this not only for the hard work, but also obviously there's an internal passion. So thank you for all of your service. To know where we're going, we must know from where we came. That is something that was handed down to me many, many years ago, and that I use frequently. To know where we're going, we must know from where we came. To never forget, we have to consistently remind. So as the youth of today are separated by generations from Pearl Harbor and World War II, we have to continue to recognize these events so that future generations never forget this. Personally, well, I'm the son of a Korean War veteran. He served in the Navy as a frogman under what was then called UDT. Today would be called Navy SEALs. And the grandson of a World War I veteran. It's also special for me today to bring remarks because I'm also the nephew of 5 uncles who served in World War II. 5 uncles who served in some of the more infamous battles of World War II, and also who made it home to reunite with their families, and who at times I was privileged where they had the opportunity to share stories of their time in World War II with many of us. My only regret today is not taping those stories, not videotaping those stories, not writing down those stories while those heroes were still with us. Now to be able to stand here as a town manager of a community who has been recognized as Rhode Island's American World War II Heritage City is indeed a special honor and a privilege. The land we stand on this afternoon was the home of an area and a group of special individuals who contributed greatly to the World War II effort. The manufacturing of ships, aircraft, uniforms, equipment, camps, bases, airfields, the construction of what later became, as we all know, the Quonset Hut, the hosting of the early arrival of military personnel, the establishment of the naval base, the birthplace of the Seabees. North Kingstown was the epicenter of the preparation and training of the support of World War II, and it is part of our history and our heritage. Decades later, we still function as an asset to our defense efforts, as this is the home of the Rhode Island Air National Guard 143rd Airlift Wing, a unit my nephew and godson was a proud member of. The home of Electric Boat, as we manufacture equipment for the continued efforts of our nation, and of course the home of the Seabee Museum. Today is also a special designation because, as has been said a few times, we as a community are celebrating our 350th anniversary of our founding and establishment in 1674. Our town has been forever transformed by the accommodations we made towards the war effort, and we are humbled and honored to be recognized for that today. America's greatest generation was created and transformed by the events that we remember today. Our nation was subsequently strengthened by these special men and women who returned home and moved our country forward into the 20th century. We are forever grateful for their sacrifice, their courage, and their contributions. And today, as Americans' World War II Heritage City, we thank you, we thank them, and we pay tribute to them. Again, my sincere thanks on behalf of North Kingstown for this amazing recognition, something our community can be truly proud of and will be for generations to come. I hope this is a continuation of our efforts to remind future generations of Pearl Harbor and of World War II so that they're never forgotten. Before I turn over the microphone to our next speaker, like I said, when you recognize people, you always worry about forgetting, but fortunately I can pan the crowd. I also see our Senator Bridget Valverde. Senator, welcome also. So hopefully I didn't miss anyone else. And so now, following me, it's an honor to recognize someone who is going to give a historical perspective, our town historian, Tim Cranston. Tim?
Thank you very much. It really is an honor for me to be here today. As Ralph mentioned before, I too am the son of a Korean War veteran, but I was always and forever changed by a Pearl Harbor survivor, a man that George Silva over there knew very well, my friend George, Alan French. My father died when I was quite young and when he was quite young. And like all good men of the greatest generation, Alan French saw a need and stepped up and filled the role in my life as one of the men who helped me become a man. So I'm forever indebted to him. Before I begin to talk about Quonset and Davisville, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't note the other fact that North Kingstown also hosted an additional base during the World War II timeframe. I was very intimately learned of this from a friend of mine named Doris Moon, who was a civilian working here at Quonset Davisville, whose sole job was to process World War II German POWs through the base, who were then transported down to a POW camp in the Saunderstown area of North Kingstown. So we not only had this base during World War II, but we also had a POW camp, which is something that many people have forgotten over the years. But to all those who had a connection to that, and even to, honestly, German descendants who have come to North Kingstown to see where their ancestors had served in the POW camps, I would like to honor them as well. And we've already talked about Pearl Harbor and the 83 years since that, and the reality is that the beginning of the planning of Quonset Davisville was 85 years ago, almost to this time frame. And that's very interesting because obviously we were not involved in World War II in the fashion that we were after December 7th of 1941. President Roosevelt and his staff were at that point trying to figure out a way to fulfill their obligations of the Lend-Lease program. And they saw Quonset Davisville as the perfect location for a base. With the Gulf Stream right outside the Narragansett Bay, this was actually the most ideal location to begin to supply the English and the Russians as they fought the war on their own against the Axis powers. Of course, December 7 of 1941 changed all of that. So I'd like to begin with the landscape itself here in 1939 when land acquisition and planning began. What existed here prior to the construction of this 3,000-acre military complex, first and foremost in the minds of local folks back in the 1920s and 1930s out here in South Knesset, as it was then known, was the 300-acre Romano Vineyard, a fixture here for decades. It even operated full throttle throughout Prohibition, bottling fine wines for what they always called ecclesiastical purposes. That last phase was usually uttered with a nudge and a wink or two. Let's face it, 300 acres of grape, that's an awful lot of communion. I know we're talking about the decadent roaring 20s here, but really? Next in the mindset of contemporary North Kingstonites would have been Wild Acres, the 1,000-acre gentleman's farm owned and operated by Charles Davall of Davall Rubber in Providence. Yes, that's right, I said 1,000 acres. You see, Charles Davall could have been the poster child for an elite group of folks who secretly did not think the Great Depression was such a bad thing. Properly positioned both literally and financially, these folks lived a Great Depression that could have been called the Great Opportunity. Labor and land could be had at a bargain rate cut cost at that time frame. Davall cobbled together 9 different farms here in the community that he purchased, and it sported a small dairy farm, a couple of stock ponds for fishing enthusiasts, a hunting preserve, and an enormous pier sized just right for his 120-foot motor yacht, the Paragon. He employed between 30 and 40 locals just to run the place. And that pier set out into the Narragansett Bay for that 120-foot long yacht was one of the situations that clinched the purchase of the Quonset-Davisville land, because the planners for this base realized that they could begin to tie ships up here immediately. Back away, well off the post road, and accessed by Camp Avenue, was the campgrounds of the Rhode Island State Militia, a parcel of land with a history extended back to the Spanish-American War and beyond, and the North Kingstown Town Poor Farm. Recent additions to the South Kingstown landscape were the summer beach cottage communities of North Kingstown Beach and Quonset Beach, tightly packed neighborhoods owned primarily by middle-class city folks for summer use only. These 2 communities, though, had been destroyed by the Great Hurricane of 1938. The remaining 1,000 acres or so was occupied by quite a number of family farms, including the successful Madison Farm, centered around the ancient home of Judge John Allen. This house still exists today, and for a long time was the Admiral's home here on the base. Quite an eclectic blend of land uses, to say the least. In 1939, with a number of strokes of the pen, including one on the desk of FDR himself, all this changed forever. The small community of South Knesset was acquired before the year was up, and the transformation began. Men, machines, and material descended upon North Kingstown at an unimaginable clip. The sheer scope and the frantic pace of this bold project to transform 2,700 acres of sleepy woods and farmlands into not one but 2 distinctly different military bases, perched side by side within the 3,000-acre parcel, was heretofore unimaginable. Literally thousands of workers, skilled and unskilled laborers, tradesmen and craftsmen alike, were needed. A vital rail spur was constructed straight through the center of an ancient peat bog, much to the bemusement of snickering locals who stood by and watched as heavy equipment sank out of sight. But can-do spirit prevailed, and soon the trains were running around the clock, loaded with all the men and machines, steel, lumber, and concrete required to build this place. On top of all this, the government issued an all-points bulletin of sorts, a general call for gravel to be used as the fill required to create the airport area. And indeed, the entire Quonset airport area is indeed made out of fill from farmers in North Kingstown. They were happy to come here for this ready source of income as the Depression winded down. An endless line of folks from North Kingstown, Exeter, Coventry, East Greenwich, West Greenwich, and beyond were there day in and day out, waiting to dump their gravel and collect their welcome cash. The noise of it all must have been deafening. Hammers banging, pile drivers thumping, trains rumbling, diesel engines humming, dredge pumps screaming, men shouting. It was into this cacophony, that nearly non-stop construction symphony, that locals and out-of-towners alike arrived. some riding in from their homes on the worker trains from Providence each and every day. When it was all said and done, men like these laid down their hard hats and their hammers and then picked up a helmet and a rifle after December 7th, 1941 occurred. And perhaps some of them came back to the same place that they helped build. At this point, they were all set out on a mission to head across the ocean to confront those troops led by an angry little Austrian man with a bad mustache and a head full of hatred. When the dust had settled and the din had subsided, what did it all mean to North Kingstown? Thinking about this, I feel the relationship between North Kingstown and Quonset, Davisville then and now, for that matter, is easily likened to the old fable about the blind men considering the elephant. A North Kingstonites' opinion on it all was a matter of perspective. To the state's earliest agriculturalists, the fabled oyster farmers of Wickford Harbor, their take on the great military accomplishments mirrored that of the Romano family, vintners of Rhode Island's first commercial wine. You destroyed our livelihood. This elephant is evil. South Quidnesset farmers and their kin felt the same thing. This elephant destroyed our way of life as their entire community was absorbed and taken over for the construction of the base. But to the vast majority of others, regular folks, like most men, fathers and husbands who worried mightily about putting food on the table and a roof over their families' heads during the end of the Depression, the military complex that replaced sleepy South Kingstown was a powerful, beneficial creature. The real New Deal upon which Southern New England rode out the Great Depression into the future. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the podium now over to Emily from the National Park Service.
At this point, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Emily Kambic, Bureau Historian, National Park Service. Emily has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Williams College, a Master of Arts degree, and a doctorate from Brown University. She has been Bureau Historian since January 2024. I can tell you that, like I mentioned earlier, we went back in putting together our application for the Heritage World War II town almost a year. It's a long process, but she and her department have helped us quite a bit. Emily.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's an honor to be here today and to share this commemoration of the strike on Pearl Harbor with all of you, and to think about what that meant for our nation as well as for your community. Right now, today, I have colleagues from the National Park Service who are also in commemoration ceremonies. One is in Hawaii, in Pearl Harbor, and one is in the heritage city of Foley, Alabama. And I say this to remind myself and all of us how this event transformed our entire nation and had a profound impact for all Americans. And so as we gather in different states today to think of it, there's much that brings us together, even as each community has its own unique history and story to tell of World War II and of the legacies that have changed our country to the present. And I'm going to talk a little about the World War II Heritage City program. I'm the national coordinator for this program that was established in 2019 by the John Dingell Act. And this program began by designating Wilmington, North Carolina as the first American heritage city, recognizing contributions on the home front and commemoration of World War II. Since that initial designation, new cities have been designated on an annual basis through an annual nomination process for one city per state or territory. And so once a state or territory has a designated heritage city, then that remains a permanent designation to honor that World War II history and commemoration. And so there are currently, as of 2024, 38 heritage cities designated around the country, from North Kingstown to Tinian in the Northern Marianas Islands. And so those territories in the Atlantic and Pacific that were so critical to the the waging and the winning of World War II are also part of this heritage. And we've had a lot of discussions about what does the home front mean on a Pacific island that was also an active battlefield. And so of these 38 communities, there are designations based on 2 criteria. One is for the historic contributions during World War II, and the other is for how those communities are continuing to remember and preserve that heritage. And the criteria for homefront contributions vary widely, but speak to the ways that World War II transformed communities around the nation and the ways that American citizens stepped up and gave to the war effort, whether through their sacrifices through enlistment and service, or through many other ways within their own communities and in migrations around the nation. So some of those ways included the growth of industry to build things like submarines, aircraft, but also all of the many different supplies and products that were needed by the military during World War II. The workforce grew throughout the United States, including men and women of every race. It was an incredible time of industrial expansion and an incredible time of urban growth in many cities as people came for these jobs, and the economy boomed coming out of the Great Depression. There were also many contributions that were ordinary and yet widespread and incredibly impactful. Things like people's participation in fundraising through war bonds, through scrap drives and gathering rubber and metals and other things that were to be used for defense production. The growth of victory gardens, because so much of American produce was going to make the American military the best fed in the world at that time. And people stepped up on the home front to grow their own food as well. So there are an incredible number of different ways that Americans made a difference during World War II at the local level, at the state level, and nationally and internationally. And that resulted in incredible transformations of communities. As you heard from your town historian, the movement and growth of many smaller communities at that point, and the growth of naval bases and training facilities and ordnance depots and all other kinds of installations around the nation was incredible. And so a lot of people also made those contributions of their land, of opening up their homes to service members when there were housing shortages, of providing meals and things like that, and volunteerism through the growth of USOs and civil defense, and other ways that citizens could step up. And of course, it can't go without saying that the contributions of so many people who enlisted in the armed forces to serve and to win the war touched every community around the nation. And so North Kingstown is a part of this national story. And it's also got its own unique story, without which World War II and its heritage today would not look the same. For example, the Quonset hut is an incredible piece of material culture that reminds us of World War II and also reminds us of Rhode Island contributions in places as far away as Utqiagvik, Alaska, where there are still housing and research facilities that date from that period and use that form. In addition, hearing about the ongoing contributions of Quonset Point and the manufacturing is also not only World War II history, but part of our ongoing military and economic history as a nation. And finally, I think being in this chapel and being able to see in person the CB Museum also is an incredible story, not only of World War II era history, but also of community preservation of that history to keep it alive for the next generation. This is an amazing site. And what this community has done to preserve that site and create and operate this museum is incredible, and you should be proud of it. You are the only World War II heritage city designated so far that connects to the CB story specifically, in addition to, I think, many other aspects that are unique to Rhode Island. This is something that is a part of our national story that we tell through the network of heritage cities that we couldn't do without your efforts here. And so I also am impressed and pleased by the connection to the 350th anniversary, because in the National Park Service, we are doing a lot of planning and commemoration of the 250th of the Declaration of Independence. So, 100 years later, there was a lot happening in North Kingstown for the first century. So these are all, though, points of juncture and transformation and self-definition of not only what a local community means, but what it means to be American. And connecting these many points in our history from 350 years ago to 250 years ago to 80 years ago to the present helps us to find those through lines of American identity and of change and of the stories of the people who have fought for freedom, for democracy, and for all of the things that we hold true as what this country means. And so by designating North Kingstown as a World War II Heritage City, we recognize and honor the contributions of your citizens during World War II, as well as the work you are doing today to keep on telling those stories and to connect them to your past and your present. And so we hope that you will keep doing this amazing work to lead historic preservation and memory in your town, in Rhode Island, and as part of that national story, connecting with the other heritage cities to help us tell a richer and more complete history of the contributions of Americans during World War II. Thank you very much.
All right, at this point, I'd like to invite Town Manager Ralph Mollis, Tim, and Emily to join us at the easel over here for a photo. Now, at this point, I want to introduce a lady by the name of Karen Iris. She's a member of Quilts of Valor. This is quite, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's quite an extraordinary program. They make these handmade quilts, and if my research is correct, they've made approximately 400,000 handmade quilts for deserving veterans. In this case, today, we're going to honor George Silva, if we can get him to sit in the chair. World War II veteran. Yeah. Stay where you are. We're going to honor today our 99, soon to be 100-year-old veteran of World War II, George Leo Silva. And I'm going to ask Karen just to talk a little bit about this program because it's really an extraordinary program.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I'm much better with first graders and a bunch of adults. I'm Karen Iris, and with me is Sarah Bannister. We want to thank you for inviting us to join you today. We represent hundreds of Quilts of Valor members and volunteers from across the United States of America. We are honored to be with you and are humbled by the service, sacrifice, and commitment to our great country made by George Silva. My involvement with the Quilts of Valor began at a quilt show in Spokane, Washington, where a Quilt of Valor group did a presentation while I was there. As the granddaughter of an Army private who was in the trenches in World War I in France, the daughter of a Marine who was injured in Iwo Jima, big sister to a Marine, wife to an Air Force officer, mom to a daughter who served in the Air Force, grandmother to an Army sniper, cousin and niece to many generations of military members, I was hooked. I needed to be a part of this foundation. At the time, I was living in Alaska. I was there for 40 years. I found Linda Kaw, the state coordinator there, from her I learned how very important our mission is. I've never looked back, and now work with the wonderful group of quilters here at the CB Museum, thanks to our wonderful friends in the CB Association. The Quilts of Valor is a grassroots group of quilters, both men and women from across the country. In 2003, it literally began as a dream. Catherine Roberts, whose son was deployed in Afghanistan, dreamt one night that if she made a quilt and draped an injured soldier, that it would aid their recovery. Since then, Quilt of Valor has comforted veterans across the country who have been impacted by war or conflict. Our foundation represents one human being reaching out and touching another without judgment, reaching out with acceptance, and with the acknowledgement of service to our nation. As a foundation, we will go wherever we're needed, whenever needed. Since the inception of Quilts of Valor, 408,730 veterans have been comforted. This quilt brings a three-part message from our hearts. First, we honor George for your service in both the United States Navy and the United States Coast Guard. Next, our quilters know that freedom is not free. The cost of our freedom is owed to the dedication and sacrifices of men and women just like you. Finally, this quilt is meant to offer comfort to you and to remind you that although your family and friends cannot always be with you, you are forever in all of our thoughts and hearts. Quilts of Valor are awarded. They're not charity quilts. They can't be purchased or mailed to a veteran. A Quilt of Valor is not just a blanket. It's a handmade quilt which contains 3 layers held together by its stitches. We think of the layers in this way. The top of the quilt with its many colors, shapes, and fabrics represent the communities and the many individuals we are. The batting is the center of the quilt, its warmth. It represents our hope that the quilt will bring warmth, comfort, peace, and healing to the individual who receives it. The backing is the strength that supports the outer layers. It represents the strength of the recipient, the support of his or her family, our communities, and our nation. The binding holds it all together, surrounding the pieces, just as a hug surrounds an individual. For each stitch that holds the layers together represents love, gratitude, and sometimes the tears of the makers. Each Quilt of Valor is created by loving hands that join bits of fabric together, one piece at a time. Quilters are known to buy perfectly good fabric, and we tear it all up and we put it back together. A Quilt of Valor may be completed by one person, or it may come about through the combined efforts of many women and men in all skill levels. Quilters often work together, sewing in groups to create these quilts. Sarah and I are part of the Quilts of Valor, Quilts of Hope, Rhode Island, and are fortunate to be able to sew each week with a group of people in Hut 3 just down the way. As we quilt with friends, we are grateful for those who will be receiving what we call our quilty hug when we drape them in a Quilt of Valor. Now through this quilt, you become part of our quilty nation or quilty family, George. As we sew, love, care, gratitude flows from our hearts through our hands and into the quilts we make. All of us as quilters want you to know that through our quilts we honor you. This quilt is an expression of gratitude, meant to thank and comfort you. We honor you for leaving all that you held dear to serve, whether in time of crisis or in time of peace for all veterans. This Quilt of Valor unequivocally says, thank you for your service, sacrifice, and valor in serving our nation. We often don't know who will be draped with a quilt we made. Often the quilter attends the award ceremony to personally drape their veteran, to have a connection. The recipient has a face to remember long after the quilt is wrapped around their shoulders, and the quilter gets to extend a thank you for a grateful nation. George, on our behalf and the Quilts of Valor Foundation, we would like to present your quilt. Thank you. It takes a special person to stand up and serve their country and its citizens. As George feels the warmth of his quilt, I want to read to you what his friend the friend who nominated him told us about. He has had a long and courageous career. So this is his quilt. Along with the quilt, we're going to give George a specific certificate. It's from the Quilt of Valor Foundation. This is awarded to E7 and So this quilt is awarded to E7 and Chief Petty Officer George Leo Silva. He served with the United States Navy and with the United States Coast Guard. The Quilts of Valor Foundation wishes to recognize you for your service to our nation. We consider it our privilege to do so. Though we may never know the extent of your sacrifice to protect and defend the United States of America, we award you this Quilt of Valor as an expression of gratitude from a grateful nation. A little bit? Do you want to read that? Okay. All right. Thank you all.
Reverend Hardgrove.
You can remain seated for the benediction. I said keep it short, but I'm going to give my little military biography. It's right here. No, I'm only kidding. I was served in the Army Guard and Reserve for 25 years. If you look at me, I should be a Vietnam vet. Unfortunately, I did things backwards. I'm an Afghanistan vet. I celebrated my 55th birthday in Afghanistan in lovely downtown Kabul. I wouldn't go there on vacation if I were you. My father served in World War II stateside. My father-in-law was D-Day +2, plus at the Battle of the Bulge as a medic. My great-uncle died in World War I. My grandfather served on a civilian yacht that had been taken over by the government in New York Harbor. He was the engineer, but he was a civilian. And my great-grandfather came over here from Germany in 1864, couldn't get a job, and he enlisted and fought in the Union Army. And I have his discharge papers. Now let us pray. Heavenly Father, we've heard many things said here today. We have celebrated many different ideas of freedom, of patriotism, of valor, of service to our nation by those who served at Pearl Harbor, to those who serve today in many places of danger, to those who will be represented on the Arizona, to those who train like the president of the War College and our own National Guard General, to our Lieutenant Governor who serves with the governor as head of our state militia, and to all the persons who've gathered here, including those young men and women who we should be so proud of the Sea Cadets, who are willing to give of their weekends and of their time. less than 1% of the American population is connected to the military. And these young people, while they may not serve in the future, they are serving us now. And we give great thanks for them, dear God, and all those who continue to participate for the freedom of this nation. As we go our separate ways, Heavenly Father, let us not forget all the gifts we have received from you, whether it be freedom or just be the air we breathe and the water we drink. And we thank you for the prosperity of this nation and ask, as we transition in governments, that our nation will continue to be a bulwark of democracy for ourselves and for the entire world. We uplift these prayers in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Hardgrove. And that just about concludes the ceremony. On behalf of the Town of North Kingstown and North Kingstown 350th Anniversary Steering Committee, I'd like to thank you all for your participation in today's ceremonies. You're invited to a reception in the Quonset hut. If you leave these doors, you turn right. It's Quonset hut number 4. It's clearly marked, and right next to that is the museum. They are both open today for you, so if you're so inclined, please stop by. And most importantly, thank you for simply being here.